All right, guys. It's August 31st, 2025. This is your sit rep on the Gaza genocide war. No end in sight, which is now virtually a report in itself. Just that we could start calling this the no end in sight segment. There's a ceasefire that Hamas had sent back to Israel. The mediators came up with it. There were more compromises. They had settled for a partial withdrawal. There were a number of things that Hamas was willing to accept just to stop the war and get the starvation campaign, stop the starvation campaign. And of course, Israel rejected it and is now using their armored vehicles to blow up buildings in the biggest way possible in Gaza City. So Hamas on August 27th, they said, we were talking about the American real estate agent Zionist Witkoff, who they said Witkoff's statements have become merely an echo of the voice of Netanyahu and his government of war criminals, blindly repeating the Israeli occupation's narrative, far from the facts known to mediators and the international community. And that's what they do now. They just lie. And this whole framework of diplomacy that they're trying to work in, that the rest of humanity tries to work in, is just unworkable because there's no, they don't feel, the Israelis, the Americans don't feel any obligation to follow through on what they promised. They don't feel any obligation to tell the truth to mediators, to the public, to each other, to much less to the people they're negotiating with. The Palestinian Authority was supposed to go to the United Nations meeting, and the Americans denied them visas. They said they can't give them visas under these various support Israel laws that they have on the books. So the Palestinian Authority, which is the greatest collaborator of Israel that is currently holding, torturing Palestinian prisoners on behalf of the Israelis in the West Bank, is not allowed to go to the United Nations because the Americans, the Israelis, are formalizing the idea that Netanyahu has stated that the other Israeli creatures, I don't know what to call them, ministers, Smotrich or Ben Gvir, or whatever they are, those guys are all saying there will never be a Palestinian state. And when they say there will never be a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority's leaders reply by saying, our cooperation with Israel is sacred. So there's an asymmetry here that is utterly beyond any ability to comprehend it, but nonetheless, that's what's going on. The Americans are not letting the Palestinian Authority, their own installed collaborators, they're not allowing them to come to America to sit at the UN. And the idea that the Americans, you have to go to America to go to the United Nations, it's absurd. And there were times, I believe, when the United Nations meeting was moved to Geneva because the Americans would not allow people to go. And that's not happening here. The UN is just meekly allowing it because that's what the UN does. They meekly allow whatever the genocidal authority, real authorities, which are genocidal, want. And it's the Security Council, the final, the final nail of in the coffin of the Security Council was at least a year ago when they passed a binding resolution. The Americans didn't veto it, calling for a ceasefire in is on Gaza, with Israel's war on Gaza, and the Americans didn't veto it, and then Israel ignored it. And the Americans said, oh, it wasn't, we didn't really view it as binding. Security Council resolutions are binding. They've been binding in the past, and now they're not. And not only are they not, they are simply not, they're nothing. Security Council is nothing now. The Security Council might as well be like one of those letters that you get your friends together, sign like a petition or something. They just petition. They're petitioning basically Israel. There was a there was this joint statement. All 15 members of the UN Security Council, except the US, issued a joint statement, included the following points. The joint statement goes like this: We express our deep concern about the presence of famine in Gaza Governorate. We call on Israel to immediately reverse its decision to expand its operation in Gaza. Famine in Gaza must be stopped immediately and international law respected. Passive voice. Who has to stop the famine? Who is to respect the law? The use of starvation as a weapon of war is prohibited under international law. Who's using starvation as a weapon? Approximately 41,000 children are at risk of death due to malnutrition in Gaza. Actually, I don't know where they got that number. All the children are at risk of death due to malnutrition. We call for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. We call the Security Council of the United Nations calls for a ceasefire. They called for one. We call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas. Disgusting. It's a disgusting line. It's a stupid, disgusting, partisan line, that last one. But it exposes that the Security Council is over. And this is a message that I've been trying to write about. I'm finalizing a Substack about this right now. And I've been writing about it for a while now. I wrote about it at the end of last year, called a piece called The Illusions of 2024. And I really think that it's time to learn and adapt to the world as it is instead of maintaining these illusions and these idealisms about this liberal order of international law and humanitarianism and diplomacy and freedom of press, freedom of speech, negotiated solutions, nonviolence. They have declared as loudly and brutally as possible, as it's possible to declare, that that is not how they are running the world anymore. And this statement from the Security Council, a body that used to create binding resolutions, a body that in the 1967 and 1973 war, the Israelis saw what they were doing as a race against time until the Security Council would make a binding resolution. Even the Lebanon War of 06, even those wars up until the 2000s, into the 2000s, the Israelis always thought we have only so much time to commit these massacres until the United Nations passes us. The Security Council, the Americans can't hold it off. The Security Council will pass a resolution and then we will have to stop. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that world anymore? I don't even know what that world, I can't remember that world. It's been 2 years. I can't remember that world. The idea that the Security Council could pass a resolution and that would stop Israel, it's ridiculous now. It's laughable. We used to live in that world. That's how the world used to be. And now the Israelis they just laugh. They just laugh it off. I don't even know that they read this. They don't even have to read this. Why should they read this? Maybe they'll read it and say, oh, the UN is anti-Semitic, more proof they're anti-Semitic, and that's it. So that's the no end in sight report for tonight. Let's go to the fronts. Yemen, you guys know that the Israelis killed the prime minister of Yemen. They killed a whole bunch of ministers in Yemen. There was a meeting, a government meeting of ministers. Government ministers get together, they have meetings. The Israelis bombed it, killed the prime minister of another country. And there's absolutely nothing except maybe like a good job from other Western countries. And that's what I mean. So the resistance is it's not just the resistance, the rest of the world, let's say, is trying to figure out how to get back a world of international law. They have a group committed to the UN Charter. It's over. Um, really think it's over. That era is over. This is an era of violence. This is an era of impunity and violence and murder. And the sooner people around the world understand the new parameters, the better. The sooner people can start to change it. They just killed the prime minister. Um, the Yemenis have said they're going to continue to support Gaza even if the sky falls. So the killing of the prime minister of Yemen is not the sky falling. It's a sacrifice. It's a loss. It's a devastating blow, but it's not going to change their position. The president, not the prime minister, the president al-Mashad, he's made some great speeches in the past. On August 30th, yesterday, he made a speech where he said, "As we console ourselves, we live the tragedy of our brothers in Gaza, and we remember the injustice done to those children who were slaughtered without sin and annihilated without right. We feel the affliction of our sisters, the women of Gaza who have become widows, bereaved mothers, prisoners, wounded, or slaughtered on the list of the dead. Our great martyrs shouldered their responsibility with full merit in the most difficult stage of Yemen's history. They pledged to God and their people and their nation to support their brothers in Gaza and Palestine, no matter the challenges and no matter the sacrifices. They have fulfilled their covenants and sealed them with their blood, crowning their journey and their struggle with the best conclusion, which is martyrdom for the sake of Allah the Almighty, in the most honorable of causes and against the staunchest of God's enemies, the criminal Zionists. That is the clear victory." To our people. And so now there's a message to individual messages one at a time. So to our people in Gaza, our position is the position, and it will remain so until the aggression is stopped and the siege is lifted from you, no matter the scale of the challenge. To the Zionists, I say, our revenge does not sleep, and dark days await you for what the hands of your filthy, treacherous government have wrought. We call on all citizens around the world to refrain from any dealings with any assets belonging to the Zionist entity. The opportunity is still available for the settlers of the two sectors to return to their countries. To all companies present in the occupying entity, my last piece of advice to them is to leave before it's too late. For when pure, sacred Yemeni blood is shed, it topples the thrones of empires that ruled the world or most of it. So what of a humiliating, despicable, and transient entity. The blood of these national symbols in our great and glorified government is sufficient for that. We will continue and we will meet challenge with challenge, and you will not taste security after today. For Allah is with us, and victory is our ally, no matter how long it takes. The price of freedom is blood, and we are the people of sacrifice, steadfastness, and defiance. So a really strong message, a real message that's, I think, worthy of the mourning that they're doing. Another spokesman who's fantastic is al-Houthi. He's basically summarized that this is a red line crossed and it puts the conflict between Israel and Yemen in a new phase. I mean, of course, escalation it's a one-way trip on escalation. On August 21st, there were three speeches since I talked to you guys last. August 21st, August 28th, and August 31st. Three speeches by Syed Badruddin Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the spiritual leader of Ansarallah. So on August 21st, he did the thing that he often does, which is kind of berating the Arab Zionist regimes, the Arabs that are supporting the Arab countries that are supporting Israel. So the Saudi ship that the Italian dock workers refused to allow to, I don't know, ship or leave, or I mean, they did some action. The Italian dock workers did some action against a Saudi ship. Not Bukhaiti, al-Houthi asked, why is there a Saudi ship carrying weapons to Israel? Al-Houthi mentioned the Egyptian gas deal with Israel. He mentioned the Greater Israel Project, the agenda that Israel has for the destruction of Al-Aqsa, which is advancing. On August 28th, the day that Israel killed the prime minister of Yemen, al-Houthi made a speech too, and he said, what the Israeli enemy is doing is an anomaly even to what human nature dictates in terms of human feelings, and a complete human and moral bankruptcy. The paper currency of the Israeli enemy that was printed 45 years ago bears a map that includes all of Palestine, all of Jordan, all of Lebanon, 2/3 of Syria, and a large area of Egypt from east of Egypt to the Nile, as well as Western Iraq and the north of the Arabian Peninsula to Medina. So this is Greater Israel. That is the plan. And al-Houthi is trying to warn these countries that they're helping Israel, even as Israel plans ultimately to dismantle their entire countries, not partition them, no, but absorb them into Greater Israel. Al-Houthi made a third speech after the assassination of the prime minister and other leaders on basically today, August 31st, earlier today. He said, the Israeli enemy targeted a workshop of the Government of Change and Construction last Thursday, leading to the martyrdom of a group of ministers and government staff. He cited al-Mashat's speech, the brother president's address, sufficiently expressed the official and popular stance. Our word is to honor the sanctity and station of the martyrs and reaffirm the stance. So he said the enemy's is a criminal foe unbound by rules, covenants, or considerations. Sacrifice is inherent to a just cause. It will not lead to retreat or weakness, but greater steadfastness, resolve, certainty, endurance, and cohesion. From day one, we conditioned ourselves for sacrifice. And then he said, the Zionist plan is the enslavement and violation of this ummah grounded in beliefs and curricula upon which positions and policies are built. The Jewish Zionist entity was built to implement domination and enslavement. And I think this is just really important for people to understand. This is the clearest understanding of what Israel is about, is stated by al-Houthi here. He said, our people refuse to be onlookers while the Jewish Zionist enemies defile the courtyards of Al-Aqsa, violate its sanctity, seek to occupy and demolish it. Operationally, we confront the enemy, target it, inflict losses, and carry out continuous operations. So he says the security battle accompanies the military battle. We've fortified the home front and achieved important successes against infiltration. God willing, further successes will foil what the Israeli enemy seeks to perpetrate against our institutions and society. So they are working on security. They're aware of the Israelis. The Israelis are not going to stop trying to assassinate people and bombing the civilian targets and trying to genocide them, like the Saudis genocided Yemen, like the Israelis are genociding the Palestinians now. So it's really important, I think, that al-Houthi is trying to analyze what Israel is about, what the agenda is for the region, which is Greater Israel, which is the absorption of Lebanon, Syria, much of the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, Egypt, much of Egypt, parts of Turkey, all are to be absorbed into Greater Israel. That's the plan. And of course, the genocide in Gaza, the bombing of Syria, the bombing of Lebanon, the creeping occupation of Lebanon, these are all parts of that Greater Israel project. So Syria, since we mentioned it, is getting bombed by Israel and also having meetings with Israel. It is a very humiliating spectacle. And because we're talking about Syria, we should also talk about Turkey. Turkey, I have a little anecdote. I used to follow the war in Afghanistan when the Americans, Canadians, Brits were occupying Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021. And if you followed that in the Canadian press, there was a funny thing because the Canadian press were based in Kandahar. They had a base, Tim Hortons, and all the comforts of Canadian life. They set them up in Kandahar, and they 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 did this thing in the Canadian media where the Canadian forces would take this village called Panjwai, the Panjwai Valley, and you would read Canadian forces take Panjwai. And you'd be like, wow, that's amazing. The Canadian forces took Panjwai. They control Panjwai. And then, I don't know, a couple months later, you'd read in the Canadian press, Canadian forces take Panjwai. But in between those months, you never saw any record in the media of Canadian forces losing Panjwai. So how come we're celebrating the Canadian military occupying the same village over and over again without ever any news that the Canadian military left that village or lost that village? And similarly, for me, that was what reminds me of that is Turkey. Every once in a while, you hear that Turkey has cut off all trade with Israel. Again, this is the fifth time Turkey has cut off all trade with Israel. How could you cut off trade with Israel multiple times? Once you cut off trade with Israel, what is there to cut off again? Well, of course, none of those 5 times, including this time, did Turkey cut off trade with Israel. Turkey is subordinate to Israel. You might do the math, you might do the Paul Kennedy rise and fall of the great powers math and say, well, how can Turkey with 100 million people, massive industrial base, manage to fend off great power plans to partition them 100 years ago? Formidable army, the biggest one in NATO, currently occupying Syria, parts of Syria. How could they just, why are they just doing whatever Israel wants? And then you just get that same mysterious mystery that they just do what Israel wants. And so Turkey has a job in this overall scheme, which is to make a lot of noise that they're upset with Israel and they're not going to take it anymore, all the while providing Israel with their oil, with their food, and with Syria. Turkey took Syria for Israel, and they are handing it over piecemeal, allowing their proxies to commit massacres against minorities, which is the basic price. That's what they are getting in return. The proxies' reward is the chance to do these massacres. And that's how Turkey pays them. They pay their proxy in massacres. And they make a lot of noise about how they're sometime in the next 400 years, they're going to fight Israel. And in the meantime, they're just giving all the resources, land that Turkey has been stealing since 2011 at least, but they're giving it all away to Israel now. So that's how seriously you should take Turkey's statements about how they're really mad at Israel. They've done more for Israel. They're doing more to hold Israel up and keep this genocide going than almost anybody. Okay, so let's go to Lebanon. Lebanon, Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hizbollah, made a speech on August 25th commemorating the martyr al-Musawi. And I thought that the speech was really interesting because he's kind of managing expectations about resistance. And this is something that I also thought was really important to do because Hezbollah was so mighty. Hezbollah was so, their performance in 2006 was so shocking. Their victory in 2006 against Israel was so shocking and so astounding to people that could be done. They announced these missile capabilities. They demonstrated these missile capabilities, especially in 2012, that I think you could get the impression that they were invincible and that they were unshakable. And I think that Israel found a formula of between the pager attack, the assassinations, the infiltration of, into these devices. Naim Qassem specifically told Al Mayadeen months ago that there was no infiltration. There's no human, and virtually no human infiltration. But their electronic infiltration of Hezbollah was extensive beyond what they thought in terms of their hardline telephone network, the pagers, the walkie-talkies. So Naim Qassem, yeah, so you could get the impression that they were an unstoppable force, but with all of the resources and the ability to put the commercial infrastructure, the global infrastructure of global commerce at Israel's disposal, creating companies and supply chains and infiltrating supply chains and infiltrating the manufacturing of and shipping of these devices. Israel was and then do it using all of that to do utterly depraved things that nobody would ever be able to anticipate. Israel was able to turn the tables on Hezbollah last year. So Naim Qassem was trying to make this point that resistance is not a resistance movement cannot repel an invasion. They're not, they don't have that kind of power to have an army that meets the Israelis at the border and repulses them. I mean, in theory, Egypt has that, although Egypt has also handed over control of the border with Egypt between Gaza and Egypt. They've handed that over to the Israelis. So whatever Israel has, I mean, whatever Egypt has, they've just abandoned any abilities they have without any fight. So that's what Egypt is doing. When I said Turkey's done more than almost anybody, gotta, I don't want to, I didn't mean to, I said almost for a reason, and I don't want to leave Egypt or the Americans or the Saudis out, but certainly Egypt has a huge role in this genocide. But back to Lebanon, he he's talking about how people argue in Lebanon, the people who want to collaborate with Israel, the people who want to disarm the resistance, they argue that the resistance cannot stop the Israelis from invading, and therefore they should disarm. Since you can't prevent aggression and all you're doing is making the Israelis mad, and as Tom Barak, the animalistic Tom Barak said, another real estate agent, Zionist traveler to the region, apparently he has Lebanese roots, he said to them that Israel's going to go wherever they want and do whatever they want in the region. And that's that. And so if Israel's going to do whatever they want and the resistance can't deter them, then shouldn't they just disarm and just let Israel do whatever they want? And this is the argument that Naim Qassem is trying to rebut. He says, who said the resistance prevents aggression? The resistance was established to confront aggression. We confront aggression. We do not prevent it. So he's just trying to manage expectations about what they can do. If Israel invades, they will resist. They will fight the Israelis that are invading and taking over. They will prevent the Israelis from permanently taking over Lebanon, or at least they will confront the Israelis in their effort to take over Lebanon, which presumably the Israelis are going to do. They're in the process of doing now. And the resistance is going to confront them. The resistance is going to impose costs on them. The resistance is going to impose casualties on them. But the resistance is not a conventional army that can match them and repulse an attack. That's never been what they could do. Even in 2006, they couldn't do that. They imposed costs on Israel beyond what Israel could absorb, and Israel withdrew. Of course, there was also a semi-functioning Security Council back then. For some reason, the Israelis were worried about international loss of support, which they're not worried about anymore. And there were various other equations, as we say, in place that don't appear to be in place anymore. So in 2025, Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hizbollah, is trying to tell his listeners, his viewers, that Hezbollah will not give up their weapons. Hezbollah will never give up their weapons, and Hezbollah will fight the Israelis when the Israelis invade and occupy Lebanon. And that's what they can do. So he has a message also in the end to the government. He says, expel the enemy from our land, stop the aggression, release the prisoners, and begin reconstruction. After that, we can come to the national defense strategy, a national defense strategy which may ultimately see Hezbollah absorbed into the Lebanese army. Why not? Of course, Lebanon exists, the Lebanese state exists as a puppet of Israel and as a puppet of the US. And their one job that they've been given, that they're scratching their heads trying to figure out how to do, is to disarm the resistance on Israel's behalf. That's a tall order. I don't think the Lebanese state thought they might have been up for the job, but these days it looks like they aren't for the time being. So they're going to either let Israel do it themselves or see if the Americans want to do it or something like that. He said, release the prisoners. I do want to make a note of that. There are Lebanese prisoners from the past round of the war in Israeli prisons. And Lebanon, the state, once again, handed over an Israeli prisoner for nothing, in exchange for nothing, on August 23rd. So that's how things are going in Lebanon, headed probably towards, like I thought was imminent. It didn't turn out to be imminent, but I do think it's coming. Dual invasion of Turkey-backed Syria, HTS, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want to call them, the Jolani people, and Israel at the same time. And that's the plan. If Hezbollah cannot be disarmed before that invasion, they'll be attacked and they will find themselves fighting both Turkey and Israel in Lebanese territory. So that is probably coming, and presumably that's what they're getting ready for in the resistance. The West Bank, I saw a story worth noting. The Palestinian Authority, who I mentioned earlier, they have announced that they're reducing school to 3 times a week because of a lack of salaries. I guess the Israelis are stealing their money, and so they can't pay salaries. And so they're not having school except 3 times a week. And one journalist said, oh, our Palestinian Authority security and intelligence also scaling back their work to 3 days a week. Of course they're not, but it was a pretty apt question. So now, of course, we have to go to Gaza, and I don't believe in reporting unconfirmed things, but you probably have heard unconfirmed reports about an assassination. I don't want to. I'm not ready to talk about it, and I can't verify it, so I'll leave any details to that. There was an assassination that was confirmed by the resistance that Mohammed Sinwar was assassinated on August 30th. There are really big battles in Gaza City, Zaytun neighborhood, Beit Hanun, preemptive attacks, raids on the Israeli soldiers. The resistance is trying to capture more Israeli army soldiers. It's very clear that they've been trying this for a little while. They're trying to figure out how to do it in spite of or in the context of the Hannibal Directive. I'm sure people listening know what the Hannibal Directive is, but just in case, the Israelis have a doctrine of if Israeli soldiers are at risk of being captured, the Israelis kill the soldier and bomb the area extensively to try to prevent capture because they don't want to trade Israeli captives for Palestinian prisoners because holding and torturing and violating Palestinian prisoners is one of the main reasons that Israel exists. And if they are willing to trade Israeli captives for Palestinian prisoners, then they lose their reason for existing. So they don't want to do that. And they've been forced to do that before several times this year, or several times in the past 2 years. And they don't want to do it. And so they're desperately trying to massacre their own soldiers. They're trying to massacre the captives that are already in Gaza and try to avoid any more prisoner exchanges. Prisoner exchanges are something the Israelis do not want to do. They want to kill their captives and they want to kill their soldiers before they become captives. So the Palestinian resistance wants to get more captives so that they can get their prisoners out, because freeing their own prisoners is one of the most important priorities of the Palestinian resistance movement. And getting Israeli captives remains the only way that they can do it. They're not going to appeal to the Israelis' consciences. They have no conscience. They're not going to appeal to the law. The Israelis don't care about the law. The only book they respect is the book of Joshua. And the only law they respect is what the massacres that they're ordered to commit in that book. So the Israeli military is extending the Hannibal doctrine, and the Palestinian resistance is trying to capture. And there was a series of reports the other night where we were watching them, and it looked like maybe the Palestinians had captured four Israeli captives, but they had not. And then that night, presumably the Israelis did a massive bombing, and where they killed Mohammed Sinwar with a whole bunch of their bunker busters, the unlimited supply of bunker busters that they've been given by the Americans to outdo Hiroshima by 7 times now and counting. And absolutely counting. There's just it just keeps going. There's no sign of any stopping this. And they have these ground-based bombs now where they don't even have to fly them up in a plane anymore. They're just driving them. They're loading them up with explosives and driving them into their targets. So there's an analyst I follow. I don't know anything about him. I think he's been at it for a while, but he's been, I don't know, as the young people say, on fire lately. Thomas Keith. The handle is I was never here, some variation of I was never here on Twitter. And he had a good, he's a kind of good writer too, in my opinion. And he has this tweet where he's talking about how Hamas has how the war is kind of going. and how the military aspect of the war is changing. And he said, Hamas is now an adaptive network, not a conventional army. This is the operational gap in Smotrich's total victory blueprint. Annexing strips of Gaza and forcing staged population transfers requires permanent forward positions, ISR towers, and constant cordon rotations. Every kilometer added is new mortar and tunnel exit exposure. History from Zaytun to Shuja'iyya shows cleared zones revert to insurgent activity the moment brigades rotate out. So I think I like that summary. The Israelis are trying to adapt to this by trying to, the thing they always do. They're trying to just blow up everything ahead of them and kind of move into the destroyed, powdered rubble. And they are hoping that with these trucks and these robots and these ground-based bombs, they can do that more effectively without risking capture, without risking casualties, just a risk-free kind of genocide rendering place into rubble. So, I don't know. I mean, that's the same question, the same unclear outcome that we've always had for years now, going on 2 years now. Is this gonna work? We don't really see this, because this is not how wars are fought. You don't, but like the book of Joshua is not the instruction manual for most wars. It's not wipe out. You don't say like wipe out the very memory of your enemy. It's usually some kind of military objective, and not like an open-ended assassination program and a creation of rubble and killing children and starving them. There's usually some kind of like capture key strategic points or occupy key territories or take land for a future land swap negotiation or take prisoners, as Hamas did on October 7th, 2023, and to try to exchange them. But what Israel's doing is different, and no one knows whether it's going to work or not, even today. They have certainly shown depths of depravity and resilience in their depravity that I don't think anybody could have predicted. So Abu Obeida, the spokesman for the Izzadin al-Qassam Brigades, on August 29th, again, possibly possibly the last one. He said it, he made this statement, and I'll read the whole thing. I'll read the whole statement. Said, the Israeli enemy's criminal plans to occupy Gaza will be a curse upon its political and military leadership, and the Israeli army will pay the price with the blood of its soldiers, and it will increase the chances of capturing new soldiers, God willing. So again, the intent to capture more. Our fighters are on high alert, ready, and in high spirits. They will present unique examples of heroism and bravery and will teach the invaders harsh lessons with God's help. Absolutely, that's already happened. War criminal Netanyahu and his Nazi ministers have stubbornly decided to reduce the number of living Israeli captives by half, and that most of the bodies of their dead prisoners will disappear forever, for which the Israeli army and its terrorist government will bear full responsibility. We will protect the Israeli captives as much as we can, and they will be with our fighters in places of combat and confrontation under the same conditions of risk and living. We will announce every prisoner killed by the aggression with their name, picture, and proof of their death. So, grim message of their statement of readiness, a statement of readiness to fight, and a statement that they know what they're facing. Abu Obeida always knew what they were facing, what he was facing. So Um, that I think is it. I want to mention one more thing. There's a Palestine Action prisoner, T. Hoxha, who is on hunger strike. I think it's close to 18 days, maybe even more. There were a number of conditions that they had. Two out of three apparently were met, but the third is still not. The British are not giving this prisoner their mail, this prisoner of conscience, this person who's being held for trying to stop a genocide, and they're on hunger strike. Wanted to mention that people know, so people know. Um, and there's a flotilla, there's a Detroit conference that's just wrapped up, a Palestine movement conference, Gaza's the Compass. Some of our friends were there. I'm sure you'll hear about it more. I'm sure many of you probably were there or following it closely. In Canada, we have Eve Engler's NDP run, or actual anti-genocide candidate is running for leadership of the NDP. We'll see how they try to sabotage him, but he's made it, and he's still going. So that definitely deserves people's support. Uh, there's a flotilla going. Did I mention that? So lots to do, lots to support, and of course the fundraisers, the try to help keep people alive. And hang in there. I'm not anticipating good news. I don't think the next time I'm back, I have a feeling that I'm going to be giving you bad news. You all know, probably, or lots of you know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to refrain from reporting anything unconfirmed. And so, with that, given that decision, I think I will stop there and tell you the usual, hang in there, and I'll see you in the next one.